I've just watched a speech by the actress Emma Watson at the UN. In that speech, she's talking about how she has decided that she's a feminist, and she's talking about the need for men to help out in promoting women's rights around the world. It's not a very long speech, it's about 10 minutes. It's provoked quite a lot of debate, and I thought it's only fair that I watch it first hand before I say much on the matter. But I was going to make a series of videos on the issue of feminism generally and my stance on it, because this is something I have brought up before in my videos, and it's something that no doubt I will do again. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about that speech. By the way, please excuse me if I have to divide this video into several parts, because my bandwidth for some reason has been shortened, so I think the maximum I can talk is 15 minutes. A lot of thanks to the people who have the patience to listen to me. I know I'm not the most riveting person in the world, so thank you for taking the time to listen to my views. Okay, about the speech. I have to say she made some fair points, and she done it in a way that was quite refreshing, at least refreshing for a feminist, because it was a lot more inclusive than the usual sort of rhetoric that the feminist movement comes out with, and I think that's the angle she was going for. She's only 22, she's a young woman, and she was saying that one of the things that she discovered when she became a feminist was that the word has negative connotations, and she couldn't understand that. Anyway, she went on to talk about the need for men to take part of this movement, because, as she put it, if you exclude half the world from a movement, then it isn't going to take effect, which is very true. And to be fair to her, she also raised some issues that do impact men. As she said, I'm from the UK, and here I've got a lot more privilege than women around the world, and she did raise issues that impact men, for example mental health problems and so on. So overall, I think she had the right idea and the right initiative, and needless to say, the speech got rousing applause and so on. But it doesn't really fundamentally change my stance on feminism as a movement. I would describe her as a moderate feminist, and I've come across quite a lot of moderate feminists, but there's still a few questions I would have for Emma Watson and others who share a similar stance to her. Now, she says that feminism should be an inclusive movement, and she talks about dictionary definitions. I think movements should be judged by their actions, not by how they appear in the Oxford English Dictionary, because feminism is an ideology, and you can have a utopian ideology, but in the end of the day what really matters is the actions and how it is portrayed. So, with all due respect to Emma Watson, feminism's bad reputation is entirely its own fault. When you have had leading figures in the feminist movement like Marilyn French, I'm just looking at some of the notes I made here. I wanted to prepare a little bit for this rather than speak too spontaneously. When you have people like Marilyn French, Robin Morgan and Andrea Dworkin coming out with this sort of hateful, fascist language that they use or used, some of them have now passed away, but the problem I have with the feminist movement is feminists will say, oh, they're just radicals, they don't represent all of us, they're a minority, this sort of thing. Okay, if that's the case, why do moderate feminists not do a lot more to challenge these people? And they still very much exist, there's no question about that. Those sort of feminists definitely still exist. And I don't accept that they're just fringe figures and they're a minority within the movement. I think they're quite a vocal, if they are a minority, they're a very vocal one. But the problem I have with this is that moderate feminists might sort of say, oh, the movement's got nothing to do with them, and we don't believe that, we don't hate men and this sort of thing. But they don't do anywhere near enough to actually forcefully condemn that sort of language. I can truthfully say I've never seen a moderate feminist condemn the sort of language that is used by the extremists. What they do is try to distance themselves from it and say, oh no, feminism's not about man-hating. This is the usual sort of thing I hear. Dictionary feminism is about equality. Feminism is not about man-hating. Feminism is about equality, this sort of thing. But very, very, very rarely do I hear feminists actually condemn that sort of language. And if you're talking about being all about equality and you're not going to condemn the extremists within your midst, then that's not a very good start. I would say to people who are responding to Emma Watson's speech, I would ask you do it in a reasonable way, because her speech was reasonable. She wasn't ranting and raving, and it was a moderate speech. It wasn't, personally, it hasn't changed my mind about feminism. It just makes me think that she happens to be a moderate feminist, and she's quite an open-minded person, but it hasn't changed her mind about feminism. And whilst she did make reference to men's issues a little bit, she still fundamentally focused on the women victimhood, men oppressor outlook. Now, she didn't say all men are oppressors. Of course she didn't say that, but it's still this idea that the campaign is called He for She, and it's calling on men to stand up for women's rights. Now, I find that a little bit patronising, because a lot of men already do. I've made this point before. The vast majority of men, if you ask them on the street, do you believe in women's equality, do you believe in women's rights, I suspect most men would say yes. There might be a minority of misogynists who don't, and you might get a few jokers who think they're being funny by saying that they don't, but I believe deep down most men really do in this day and age. So the campaign's called He for She, but what it's sort of doing is saying that all men are collectively to blame for the actions of some. Now, she's saying that it's about including men in the campaign, but it's still basically promoting the language of female victimhood versus male oppression. If it's really about equality, if that's what the initiative is, then surely there should be some sort of campaign to tackle problems that both genders face. Now, she said men have issues too, and she's absolutely right about that. So why is there not an equivalent campaign called She for He? You know, if feminists really believe in equality, and if they really want to argue that feminism helps men as well, why is it so many feminists don't recognise men's issues, and if men's issues are raised, they're basically shouted down? There's plenty of examples of this. Because it isn't just a case that men's issues are trivialised by the feminist movement. I mean, she's saying that you know, men don't have the confidence to come forward with mental health problems and so on, and she's right about that. She's right to raise it, but I partly blame feminism for that. I think patriarchy is also partly to blame, although today the concept is quite lucid. But traditional patriarchy certainly did put a lot of pressure on men, and it would be stupid to blame feminism for everything. But I do in part blame feminism for the challenges men face, because it is feminism that denies those challenges exist in the first place. Just because Emma Watson, as one feminist, acknowledges they do, doesn't change the general direction the movement has always taken, which is to literally laugh at these things. If you doubt me, there's plenty of videos to support this. I mean, look at the debate. I think it was Toronto University. They had a seminar on men's issues. What happened? A bunch of feminists switched on the fire alarm to disrupt that meeting. That is all too common when it comes to men's issues being addressed. I've seen a male MP in the House of Commons raise an issue with Theresa May. He was shouted down. It was about fathers' rights. Now, Emma Watson actually raised that issue, to her credit. But again, that's something that, I mean, the feminist movement constantly promotes the idea of male privilege, so it's a little bit inconsistent to say, oh, we believe in men's rights, but we're also going to say men have privilege. That's mixed messages. If you believe in men's rights, then you have to acknowledge that there are issues that impact men. One issue she didn't mention was that the majority of homeless people are men. I didn't see much privilege about that. Now, this is not a video about attacking Emma Watson. Like I say, her speech was quite reasonable, and It doesn't change my mind about feminism, but it's not so much about her, it's about the wider movement. Like I say, she got sort of standing ovations and stuff, but she is one person, and that does not change the direction that the movement has been for at least the last 30 years. I've always said that I support the initiatives of first wave feminism. I've also said that there are absolutely issues in the world that do impact women. And at this point I want to explain why I don't call myself an MRA, a man's rights activist. Although I do sometimes voice concern about men's issues, I don't join that movement because I think it is just as divisive as feminism. And I've seen a lot of MRAs come out with just the same sort of polarising language that feminists do, except in reverse. And I think some MRAs are just anti-women. I think they don't exactly help themselves, because they in a sense they give fuel for the feminists to use, because they get into these very angry rants about how terrible and evil feminism is. And whilst I'd agree with some of that, not necessarily the evil part, but the problematic part, that's fine. But the problem with the MRA movement is they are also sort of wallowing in victimhood. They're saying everything is terrible for men, and that's just exaggerated. And they'll even go as far as saying feminism has destroyed Western civilization and this sort of thing, and that's just rubbish. I mean, when they use that sort of language, it doesn't help their case, and it doesn't help loads of us, I would say, moderate people who have an issue with feminism but don't necessarily want to join a movement that is just the reverse side of the coin. And I don't like that, because it's just about sort of saying that when they say things that not all men are rapists, I've seen MRAs go to the extent of trying to claim that rape doesn't even exist, which is just blatantly stupid and an insult to the victims of that terrible crime. So I think the position that those of us who take issue with feminism need to first of all assume is an acknowledgement that there are issues that impact women. Because if we don't do that, then the feminist movement will just turn around and say, oh, you're misogynists, you don't care about women's rights, you only pretend to. And I would almost use the word hurtful, because I know I do. I guess moderate feminists like Emma Watson would say, oh, you're actually a feminist. I'm not a feminist because I don't believe in pigeonholing myself with any ideology. The only thing I do call myself is a centrist, because I believe that my political views go somewhere to the centre. But I don't call myself anything else. And I don't think anyone should be bullied into conforming to the feminist movement. And this is something else that Emma Watson completely ignored in her speech. Okay, I'm focusing on her, but it's because it's getting a lot of support, and I just want to point out that she missed out quite a lot of things. The language she was using personally was very moderate, but she is completely ignoring why the movement has such negative connotations. And with all respect to her, she's got her head in the sand a little bit as to why the movement, I mean, she needs to look a bit deeper as to why so many people are put off this. Maybe when she sees the sort of bullying behaviour so many of her fellow feminists engage in, when she sees the sort of intolerant attitude many of them take, where they go to the extent of censoring, trying to shut up, bullying other women, demonising men, this isn't an exaggeration. There's plenty of evidence for this. So when she asks, she's sort of complaining that the movement has a bad image, that's why. Because it's brought it on itself. Because by nature, it is a divisive movement. Any movement that specifically claims to be all about just one gender is divisive. And feminists can say all they want, that they believe in men's rights as well, but the movement is called feminism. She says the dictionary definition is about equality. I would argue the dictionary definition is about pushing for women's rights. And that's fine, I have no problem with that. But that's what it is. And actually, that is a dictionary definition. Now, earlier I mentioned the de facto situation, and I'm going to have to cross into another video here, so please bear with me. But the de facto situation is quite different. I've come across a lot of women who have described themselves as former feminists, In other words, they joined the movement because they saw problems that were affecting women, and they wanted to be sort of part of a collective effort to take that on. And I'll go on to another video at this point.